What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Footy with an Edge. Manchester United have just beaten Fulham 3-1 to go through to the semi-finals of the FA Cup. And I'm going to be honest, we were crap today for the first 70 minutes of that game, and Fulham absolutely played us off the park, and they would have probably gone on to win that game. And then in the 70th minute, the most bizarre set of events occurred, starting with Willian trying to audition for a goalkeeping role in the Next Goal movie. Then Marco Silva asked Chris Kavanagh to screw himself and get sent off. And Mitrovic tells the ref that would have never been a red card in Serbia, and while that scuffle happened, gets sent off himself. I mean, for three people to lose their heads like that in the space of 60 seconds is almost unheard of. At least I haven't seen anything like that in years. So despite me almost falling asleep in the first half, we have a lot to talk about, starting with how both teams set up today, and then we'll get into some good and bad performances from United players, especially Marcel Sabitzer. As always, please drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy, and don't forget to turn on all notifications to never miss out on content just like this. So United came into this game knowing that we were missing Casemiro due to the 4-match ban, and there were lots of questions about the midfield. I think most of us thought that he would play Fred and Sabitzer in the pivot and leave McTominay on the bench, but Erik ten Hag went with McTominay in the starting lineup next to Sabitzer, probably to provide the physicality and height and aerial dominance against someone like Mitrovic. So United started in a 4-2-3-1 that you see here, but played a 2-3-2-3 in possession that looked like this. In this shape, you had Weghorst up top with Rashford and Sancho on either side, and interestingly, they actually started off on the opposite sides than you see here for the first 8 or 9 minutes and then swapped back over to how it's lined up here. So I'm not entirely sure what the plan here was from Ten Hag, but anyways, that's what happened in the first 10 minutes. Behind them, you had Bruno and Sabitzer playing in the inside spaces here. Then you had McTominay playing the Casemiro role next to Shaw and Wan-Bissaka. Interestingly, Ten Hag normally has the fullbacks playing in the inside spaces, as you might have seen in the previous videos we've done on the channel, but today he had them playing a little wider, closer to the touchline, because they had two players ahead of them in the inside spaces already. Whereas normally you have Bruno as the sole player operating in the pocket here, which gives them a little more space to operate in the inside spaces, but that didn't happen today. Now, a lot of people will criticize McTominay's performance today in the Casemiro role, and rightly so. He didn't really have a great game today. You often saw Sabitzer and Bruno drop really deep to pick the ball up from the center backs, and while that happens with Casemiro in this role as well, it doesn't happen as much as it did today. For me, McTominay just does not show for the ball enough because he doesn't trust himself to take in a short first touch and find a teammate beyond him. And that's probably the worst sign you can see from a player, because we've all seen even Casemiro take a poor touch or play a poor pass, but it doesn't seem to bother him that much. He backs himself to win the ball back if he loses it, and he wins the ball back when his teammates lose it too. So overall, the team doesn't hesitate as much when Casemiro is playing in this role because they know that he's got their back, whether he loses the ball or they lose the ball. McTominay, however, is not as good as Casemiro in winning the ball back, and so it seems like he's always worried about what's going to happen if he loses it. And I get the feeling by watching him that he'd rather play in the Sabitzer role in this area and have someone else take the CDM duties over from him. And that's just not a good place to be as a player in this squad. I think I'm more than happy to keep him as a squad player, but if he has any ambition, he'll go play for a Crystal Palace or a Leicester or a Bournemouth, because I think he'll get first team minutes as an 8 in those teams. So time will tell what happens with McTominay. Now, in the first half, United couldn't really string together more than 4 passes from defense to attack, and the ball kept breaking down in the middle third of the pitch. We'd have good moments of play like a good tackle or a nice pass from defense into midfield, but we'd follow it up with a crap pass and then just lose all momentum. And I have a clip to show you guys the perfect example of this here. We start with Sancho winning a loose ball in midfield while facing his own goal. As we play along, Sancho doesn't have a great passing option near him because Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Maguire, and David De Gea are all marked closely by Fulham players. As we played along and pause it right there, you can see David De Gea is actually asking for it to his right, and this signals to Mitrovic that Sancho's going to make that pass, so he gets ready to press De Gea. But Sancho sees this space in front of Martinez and makes the risky pass through here into Martinez's path. So Sancho's pass, while risky, takes out 3 Fulham players from the game, and United are basically 8v7 going towards the Fulham goal, so there should be more space in the Fulham half. Here we see that Martinez has pretty much 5 passing options available to him. The balls out to Shaw and Rashford are relatively easy angles to hit on his left foot for someone like Martinez. The angles to Sabitzer and McTominay are a little more tight and probably a little more risky, but Bruno Bruno through the middle here is the right pass because he's the right player who can find the next pass after this one. And that's exactly what Martinez goes with. As he makes that pass, we pause it here. Now, so far, the decision making from Sancho and Martinez has been spot on. And as Bruno receives the ball here, let's evaluate his options quickly. He can play a safe ball into Luke Shaw's path, who can then pass it into Rashford and the play continues from there. Or he can take a touch to get away from Reed here and make a better angle to pass it into Rashford from this area here. Or he can go for the first time through ball for Sabitzer, who's running into this space here. And that would be the sort of most dangerous pass to pull off. And obviously, knowing Bruno, that's what he goes for. And it's an absolutely horrible pass because the weight isn't correct and neither is the angle. So like I said, we weren't able to string together more than 4 passes in the first half, and in this play we couldn't even complete 3 passes in a row. Now let's get back to the tactics board to discuss what Fulham did really well defensively. So Marco Silva had his players playing in a 4-4-2 defensively, where Mitrovic and Pereira were pressing United's back 3 in Martinez, Maguire, and McTominay. And Pereira in particular was occupying McTominay quite often to stop the ball from coming into him, and when Pereira pressed one of the center backs instead, Reed from midfield would step in to stop McTominay from getting the ball. So the combination of Fulham's press and McTominay's relative unwillingness to show for the ball meant that it was very difficult for United to build up the play through the middle. Then you had Willian and De Cordova-Reid playing almost as wingbacks, which meant that there were always 2 defenders on the ball carrier, whether that was Sancho and Rashford on the wings or Sabitzer and Bruno trying to help out in those areas. So by shutting off the middle and defending with numbers on the wings, United didn't really have an easy way through Fulham. The ball just kept breaking down either in the middle third in these areas or in the final third in the wings. So as impressive as Marco Silva's side were defensively, they were even more impressive in possession. Fulham started in a 4-2-3-1 but played a 2-3-4-1 in possession that looked like this. In this shape, you had Mitrovic occupying United's 2 center backs up top, with Reed, Pereira, and Willian making the attacking 4 in behind Mitrovic, and you had Palhinha playing as the lone CDM next to the 2 fullbacks in Tete and Robinson, and of course the 2 center backs behind them. And in possession, Fulham basically targeted United's left-hand side. You had Bobby Reed, Pereira, and Tete all attacking down this side by causing overloads against these 3 players, namely Shaw, Martinez, and Sabitzer, and they struggled a lot. In the first half, I can recall Shaw getting skinned several times. I can recall Martinez giving the ball away in this area in midfield. Basically, these 4 players were creating overloads constantly with 1-2s and third man runs in beyond, with Tete joining in as well. And because Ten Hag usually asks Rashford to not help much defensively in favor of being in an advanced position when we get into transitions, United really struggled here. In fact, at times, because Sabitzer was playing in an advanced role when we had the possession, as soon as it broke down and Fulham were in transition, we were 2v3 in this area quite often, with Tete probably being further back. You still had Reed, Pereira, and Reed against Martinez and Shaw, and that's why we were really struggling. Now, I think by far the most impressive thing I saw from Marco Silva's side was the way that they were building out from the back. Leno would often step out from the goal with the ball into this space here, and Diop and Ream would go right at the corners of their box to create this 3 at the back here. The fullbacks would be holding further forward on the touchline, right at the edge of the touchline, and Palhinha would be in a central area providing Leno with the passing angle through the middle. I mean, this is straight out of the Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, or Nagelsmann playbook, because those teams are trying to increase the distances that oppositions have to cover when defending, and as a result give their players more time and space to operate on the ball. And this makes it very hard to defend against, because Weghorst, Rashford, Sancho, Fernandes, Sabitzer all have to do a lot of running if they want to press any of these players. And you'd expect this playstyle to come from teams like Man City, Bayern Munich, PSG, but not from a newly promoted championship side. Yeah, I think people tend to forget that this is Fulham's first season back in the Premier League, and for them to be building up to play like this and sitting 9th in the Premier League is absolutely unheard of. And this is why when people argue that the Premier League is not the best league in the world, I asked them to go watch teams like Brighton, Brentford, and Fulham this season. I mean, these teams would easily finish in the top 4 in the La Liga, Bundesliga, Ligue 1, and maybe even the Serie A. The quality on display today from Fulham was absolutely insane, and Marco Silva deserves massive credit for it. And the worrying thing from a United perspective perhaps is that we were only really missing 2 first-team players from the lineup in Varane and Casemiro, because arguably Sancho is as good as Antony and Sabitzer is as good as Fred. And speaking of Sabitzer, let's address his performance today before we wrap up this video. So Sabitzer had some good moments in the game today. Of course, he got his first goal in a United shirt, and I'm very happy for him. But that did come after Fulham went down to 9 men. He had a decent shot at the edge of the box in the first half that went straight to Leno, and he had a nice pass with his left foot to Rashford in the 69th minute that could have been an assist. But overall, I didn't think he had enough of an impact on this game. And before the 2 red cards, he had one shot that got blocked inside the box in the 40th minute. And in the game overall, he had 44 touches, 1 chance created, just 1 pass into the final third. And defensively as well, he won 0 tackles, got 1 block, 2 interceptions, and just won 1 each of ground and aerial duels. Now, if you want to play devil's advocate, you could say, oh, he hasn't had the chance to play with Casemiro or Bruno in midfield, and he'll look a lot better in that situation. But I'd argue that he will not necessarily, because look at the best parts of his game. He's great at shooting from outside the box in these areas here. He's great at creating stuff in terms of passing and moving with both feet. But outside of that, his defensive output isn't anything special, and he's not particularly strong or good at headers. And the stats back this up because he had 4 shots with 3 on target today. He took his finish really well and also created 0.79 XG. All signs are telling me that he'd be best playing in the Bruno role instead of playing in this 8 role that we need in this team. And you might argue like, okay, let's move Sabitzer into Bruno role and let's move Bruno back into the 8, but I'd rather not do that. Sabitzer, in my opinion, is in that weird spot where he's not good enough to play as a CDM or an 8, at least in this team, and he's not better than Bruno to start as the 10. So if we want to sign him next season, it'll be mostly as a backup for Bruno in the 10 role. And as a 29-year-old with 2 years left on his contract, Bayern will probably ask for 30 to 40 million for him. I don't think it's worth paying that for a second choice number 10. Look, maybe he'll prove me wrong till the end of the season by scoring in the FA Cup final or the Europa League final, but as of now, I think we should look for a starting 8 in this team instead of forking out cash for a backup for Bruno Fernandes. Get in the comments with your thoughts. Do you think Sabitzer will come good in this team? Do you think we should get him next season even if he costs 40 million? Maybe if we can get him for 20 mil, sure, sign him right now. But I don't think Bayern will be that easy to negotiate with. So get in the comments. What do you guys think about Sabitzer? Like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.